ようこそ私の授業へ。私はマダム先生と申します。I'm Madame Sensei. We're going to start our Duolingo Japanese course today. We are on skill number 1, hiragana. Now, before you've gotten to here, remember, you've already done the bar at the top for hiragana so that you're extra steeped in it because I don't want any romaji. I don't want any romanization whatsoever because I want to protect your accents. So the Duolingo tips gives you an overview of hiragana, katakana, and kanji. And I want to talk about that more in depth. To understand the Japanese written language, we first have to talk about China. And if you ever get interested in Korean, this is the same story for Korean. Our story begins 4,000 years ago in China. China is the center of the world. They named themselves the Middle Kingdom. And they had invented all sorts of stuff. And usually in class, I'll have you guess what they invented. And you'll finally come up with like firecrackers and silk and different ways of cooking. Pasta. Pasta comes from China. That paste is because Marco Polo said, oh my gosh, what are they doing with that flour and water paste? That's our word for pasta. So China had invented so many things, and they decided that they were going to go sell their stuff around the world. So they come through the Korean Peninsula, and they come to Japan. And they say, hey, what can we sell you? And they've got their paper and pencil, and they're ready to take the order. And the Japanese people say, what are you doing with that paper and pencil? And China says, we're taking your order. We're going to write it down. And Japan says, wait a minute, what is writing? Like many languages, Japan had never thought about writing it down. They had their own spoken language, but it had never occurred to them to write it down. And so the main thing, more so than any fireworks or any kind of food or any silk or anything, the greatest thing that China exported to Japan is the writing system, okay? So they taught Japan how to write. They taught Korea how to write also. Super cool. So what basically started 4,000 years ago in China was they started, hey, this is the sun up in the sky, okay? It's a circle. They put a little dot in the middle to show that it was a circle. These little lines, ignore those, okay? But this is really hard to carve into a rock or to carve into a brass bell or something. So eventually they squared it off. Became an oval first, and that little dot in the middle turned into a line, and then it turned very square. All right, any of you who like Minecraft understand it's much easier to draw a square than it is to draw a circle. So this happened 4,000 years ago in China. By the time they were traveling through Korea and Japan, that was 2,000 years ago. Now, as we go further in the course, I'll explain why there's so many different pronunciations for stuff. But in a nutshell, it's because the Japanese people were learning how to write, and so they were picking up Chinese at the same time, and so they were writing down Chinese as spoken by whatever accent that group of Chinese people had, and they're writing it down with a Japanese accent. And then years pass, and then they learn another pronunciation, and so things get kind of cool. We'll get into that more later. But right now, all you need to know is that we started with kanji. Long before there was anything else, there was kanji, and the Japanese people were writing down the kanji. Problem is that Chinese syntax and Japanese syntax are very different. Extremely different. Chinese syntax is closer to English. In Japanese, as I'm going to show you, verbs come at the end. And there's also these things called particles. And after a while, the Japanese were like, how are we going to write those down? How are we going to show that our verbs have tense? Chinese verbs don't have tense. So eventually they realized as they were writing, here's a kanji right here. This is an. Let's say you write it in a very, very flowing way, very flowing style of writing it. You come up with this. This is a different style of writing. And then this is the most flowy style of, well, one of the most flowing styles of writing. Oh my gosh. The women in the court, the women of high breeding who were learning how to read and write, they realized, oh, you know what? If I write this super fast, not fast, but super beautiful flowy script, I get this. Let's say from now on, whenever I see this, it doesn't mean this anymore. This means peace. Having a woman in your house is peaceful. That means peace. From now on, whenever I see this, not this, not this, not this, but really abstract, it doesn't mean peace. It's just the sound, ah. Okay, here's a kanji that's pronounced E. Let's write it in a different style. Let's write it in a different style. From now on, whenever you see this, let's just pronounce it E. Forget the meaning. How about this? This is the U of uchu, outer space. Just more flowy, more flowy. Every time we see this, it's just U. E. That's going to be E. And then O is kind of cool. Look at that. Look how that started. Okay? And then it got really stylized and even more stylized, and now it's O. So now we have several different styles of writing. We've got the kanji, which has a meaning. Every time you see a kanji, it means something. But sometimes you want to add ing to a word. Sometimes you want to add ed to a verb. Sometimes you want to show something. Sometimes you want to put a particle, which in English we don't have particles, but let's say we want to add the word the or okay? That's what hiragana is going to be reserved for. And we'll talk about this more in a second. Last thing Duolingo says is that n ends the syllabary. And as long as we're talking about n, I want to throw in as much culture as I can. This is super fun. You know how in English we have this game, hey, my name is Alice. I come from Alabama and I eat apples. And then you go to the next person, and the next person has to say, B, my name is Barbara. I come from Boston and I eat bananas, blah, 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 blah. We have that same game in Japanese. This is called Shiritori. And what you're going to do is you choose a word, and any word at all, as long as it doesn't end with n. There is no word in the whole language that starts with n. So as long as you choose a word that doesn't end with n, you're still in the game. And I happen to have a couple of mazes that are done with Shiritori. And you can see, like here, this is sakurambo, cherries, sakurambo. So the next word has to start with bo, boshi. Next word has to start with shi. We could go to shimauma, or we could go to shika. All right, if we go to shimauma, then we get to mame, and then we get to meron. Oh no, meron ends with an n, so that's a dead end. All right, just super fun game. When we have fire drills at school and we're outside waiting bored, I'm going to make you play Shiritori with me because it's fun. All right, to talk about katakana is a bit more. I'm trying to keep these videos short, about 10 minutes in length. So katakana will be handled in episode 6 when Duolingo introduces katakana. Okay, bear with me until then. All right, so most of this lesson, most of this skill is fairly straightforward, okay? You're going to learn some words. They're going to show you pictures. All right, you don't need to look at me doing that. It's all pretty easy, all right? So let's talk about the interesting stuff here that you wouldn't expect. First of all, we've got our first color. Sometimes they write shiro, and sometimes they write shiroi. Here's akai, and sometimes they write aka. And here's aoi, and sometimes they write ao. Let's look at this. I've written the kanji here so you can see it better. One of the secrets to memory retention is I want to get you looking for patterns. If I can get you to recognize the pattern, you will memorize quicker and better. So let's look at this. You've probably already noticed the pattern. I'll give you a second of think time. We have shiro. We have shiroi. We have aka. We have akai. We have ao. We have aoi. What's the difference? One of these things is not like the other. Yeah, all of these have an E added. Okay? Basically, this is the noun form. This is the adjective form. These are called E adjectives, and you are going to love these so much. They're so much fun. Most of the adjectives in the Japanese language are E adjectives. If they're not E adjectives, they're not adjectives. And there are a few things that in English we think of as being adjectives, but in Japanese they're going to be nouns or they're going to be verbs. All right? Now I'll show you those when we come to them. For the most part, if it has an E on the end, it's most likely 98% of the time an E adjective, okay? Even the verbs, if you already know some verbs with the nai form, that's technically an E adjective. We'll talk about that. They work similar to verbs. So when I teach you how to inflect verbs, I'm going to teach you how to inflect E adjectives. I love it. It's so cool. No, you cannot add E to anything and automatically turn it into an adjective. There are ways that you can make an E adjective into a noun, and I will show you some of those. They're super fun, super easy. But for the most part, we're going to be looking for words that have an E on the end already, and then we can do stuff to them. In the Duolingo tips, welcome to the Japanese course. Many aspects of the Japanese language are quite simple, such as the sound system, and yes, even most of the grammar. Here we go. Most of the grammar, E adjectives, so easy, so simple, they're all going to work the same way. There's one irregular, and even that works pretty similar to all the others. You're going to love this. Next thing, when you're out looking at Japanese in the wild, you're not going to just see hiragana only. You're going to see hiragana mixed with kanji, mixed with katakana. Let's start getting you ready for that right now, and I'm so happy that Duolingo is doing this now. Here, for one, you could choose ichi. You could choose the kanji. Look at that. It's one stick. And that's how that evolved. It's just one stick. That means one. Next thing, they introduce the word ohayo. Ohayo is short for ohayo gozaimasu. Gozaimasu is the polite ending. You can get away with just saying ohayo. That's fine. Let's look at this word. This is the kanji right here. Ohayo. You remember how I said this was the sun? Well, we can take the sun and we can put it into other kanji, and it will give us some indication of what that kanji means. It might have to do with time. It might have to do with day. So this kanji right here, ohayo, or ohayo gozaimasu, this is the sun, and it's rising over a blade of grass. This is supposed to be a blade of grass. When does the sun rise? Why, early in the morning, of course. So ohayo literally means it's early. If you ever hear anyone say hayaku, hayaku, that means quickly, okay? So hayai can mean early, it can mean quick. This phrase ohayo or ohayo gozaimasu just means it's early. There is no generic hello word in Japanese. You can't just say hello. You have to know what time of day it is. And so in the morning, you're going to say ohayo or ohayo gozaimasu. Around noon, you get to switch over to Konichiwa. You probably already know Konichiwa. Konichiwa literally means, hey, speaking of this day, how's it going? We just leave off the how's it going part, okay? And then around nighttime, maybe around 6 o'clock, you're going to switch over to konbanwa. Konbanwa is speaking of this evening. This is rigid, set in stone. You cannot say ohayo at different times of the day. It has to be in the morning. You cannot say konnichiwa all day long. It has to be in the middle of the day, the afternoon. And you cannot say konbanwa except at nighttime. Okay, the last thing I want to teach you is Duolingo teaches you how to say hi, yes. You're learning hiragana. I might as well teach you how to say the slangy yeah. Yeah is eh. Take the eh and double it. Eh. That gets you yeah. All right. That is it for hiragana 1, hiragana ichi. Now you know it's ichi. And that's all that you're going to come across. Ask me questions in class. Post comments if you have questions. And I'll see you in our next episode.